Hello, this is the recap video for if you need more help with the lesson for the New England or the Northern Colonies that we did on September 3rd, or if you were absent. Please do make a copy of the document so that you can actually type onto it, and this belongs in your Unit 2 folder for the colonies. There is a video of me reading the actual textbook questions and the textbook passages itself out loud here. It says guided read aloud, video linked here. So that I'm reading the textbook and actually stopping to tell you, like, okay, you're going to listen for the answer for number 2, for number 3. Instructions on this document, it says use the textbook pages 53 to 58 to answer these questions. You should have a physical printed copy of the actual textbook, but if you prefer to do everything digitally, then you have access to the textbook if you just sign in through Clever and go to McGraw-Hill, and this is for Chapter 2, Lesson 2. Okay. Before you do the textbook questions, you may want to check in with the slideshow that is also posted on Google Classroom. We discussed how there are 13 English colonies, and when we study them, we usually break it down into 3 different regions. Sometimes textbooks will break it down into 4 different regions. And so we're starting off with the New England colonies because the last thing we talked about was Plymouth in Massachusetts and the Mayflower Compact. I went over some vocabulary terms. A merchant is a person who trades or sells goods. Subsistence farming is when a family grows just enough food to survive, subsistence meaning surviving. So they're not growing a bunch of things to sell in bulk across the sea to England. And to manufacture is to make or to mass produce. You have a skies card that's asking you to describe the New England environment. What do you notice about it? And then we talked about the New England environment, that it is a harsher climate because it's farther north. They have a very short growing season and very long cold winters. So that's why families, they can really grow like a lot of extra food for themselves. By the coast, it is definitely very rocky, and we saw in the America, the Story of Us video before this that there were Native American tribes who taught Plymouth settlers how to put fish in the soil to fertilize it more. Now in this region, they do have a lot of large forest. Even today, they have more forest than we would see here, like in the valley. And this does become a very important resource to them. Okay. And they are on the Atlantic coast. In terms of their products, we did discuss that they use a lot of timber, a lot of wood, especially in terms of like shipbuilding and all the supplies they would need to build wooden ships. They're a center for business and trade. And so some of the things that they're producing to export out or to ship out include fish that were salted and then sent to England. Whaling, because there's no electricity, they would take the whales, kill them, and then use their oil or their blubber in order to light their lanterns. There was a big fur trade in this region. Originally, settlers are working with Native Americans to get the animal furs, which would be worn in cold weather, like in that region and in England across the sea. But then eventually colonists are competing with Native Americans for control of that fur trade. Rum is something that is produced in these northern colonies, and one of the reasons for that is because they're using these wooden barrels in order to age the alcohol, and a lot of these things get sold back in England. And here is a map of the major exports, so you can take a look at what was being exported. Now, as more and more settlers go in to these colonies, we're talking about thousands and thousands of people over a few decades move in. They are taking more and more land away from Native Americans, and you can see that their list of exports, or like the things that they're able to do, it continues to grow. In terms of their people, there are a lot of very religious people who go to these New England colonies, especially in the colony of Massachusetts in the 1630s. About 15,000 people moved to Massachusetts for religious reasons. A lot of these people are called pilgrims because a pilgrim is anyone who travels or takes a journey for religious reasons. In these colonies, they tend to have a lot more educated people because these are people who typically read the Bible, or they're business people, they're manufacturers, lawyers, ministers, reverends, and so they tend to be more educated, including the women. A lot of people were brought up reading the Bible, and so they are able to read. And in terms of their government, in this set of colonies, the New England and Northern colonies, there's a lot of participation in the government by the people. People would host town meetings. They typically had self-governing charters. A charter is an organization that runs independently. They just get permission to start. And so, for example, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, they got permission from the king to set up a colony, but they're very independent people. This is the region that created the Mayflower Compact, which is the first example of self-government by the colonist. And it really leads to this idea that in the colonies, they can run themselves. They don't need to rely on a government across the sea in England. So these will be some of the more rebellious of the colonies, especially Massachusetts, when it comes to the American Revolution. There are some extra videos for you guys in the slideshow. And just taking a look at what the skies cards would have looked like. There's a lot of multiple choice cards. It will alert you to the correct answer if you did not get it. Please do take a look when it has the picture, the information there, the map, the titles, everything on the cards before you take the time to answer. And so you have these cards to check in that you understood the information, and then a weekly reflection, which you could type, you could record yourself, it's up to you. So I recommend doing the skies cards first, check in with your knowledge, and then move on to the questions for the New England colonies.